Welcome to the MapleMoney Show, the podcast that helps Canadians improve their personal finances to create lasting financial freedom. Today on the show, let's have a bit of fun by going through all the money mistakes JD Roth has made over the years. JD Roth was one of the very first personal finance bloggers when he started GetRichSlowly.org. Now there's a point to his confessional. We're going to show you common money mistakes and how you can make sure you take the right steps to avoid them. Get rich slow with our sponsor, Wealthsimple. Put your money to work in a super smart, low maintenance, low fee portfolio and watch it grow. MapleMoney listeners get their first $10,000 managed for free for 1 year by visiting MapleMoney.com/Wealthsimple. Now here's JD. Hi JD, welcome to the Maple Money Show.
Hey Tom, good to be here.
So I wanted to have a show on money mistakes. So I thought, who's the person I know that's the absolute worst with money? I thought my good friend JD was perfect to have on.
That's right. I've done a lot of dumb things in the past, and I still do. You know?
Yeah, I've admitted to a couple already on the podcast too. But today it's your turn. So,
I'm here to help.
Well, thanks for coming on. We'll have fun here. For those watching on video, they'll notice that you don't look dressed right now, because you're sitting in the hot tub as you record this. On audio, maybe no one will notice, but other than me just calling it out,
I could splash, and then your listeners would know.
So let's just hop right into it. What's sort of the first maybe the first money mistake you really ever made going back to then?
Oh boy, the first money mistake I made. Now, I don't know. I can remember making some as a kid. There's no question. I think the first money mistake I made, it was like a life of crime. I was. I'm trying to think of how old I was. When I was young, I liked comic books. I've always been a nerd, right? Mm-hmm. I still like comic books. But I didn't have much money. This is like when I'm 8, 9, 10 years old. And I learned that Dad, when he got home from work, he would empty his change and set it on one shelf in the bedroom. I've never told this story in public before. He would put his change on one shelf in the bedroom. So I learned, I could go take 25, 50 cents. And he would never know because he's not counting his change. And then I got bold and I started taking $1 bills and then $5 bills. And eventually he caught on. He's like, money's disappearing. And he searched my bedroom, and sure enough, he found where I was stashing the money I was taking from him because he had put a mark on the bills so he could figure out who had them. And so that was a mistake. I was turning to a life of crime. Instead of like volunteering to do chores to make money, I was stealing my money for my comic books.
I was just gonna say,
as a kid.
Yeah, that concerns me a bit because already my two boys, they'll kind of notice like, oh, there's some money there that they haven't taken it, but they're definitely noticing when there's money laying on a counter.
Yeah, but for me, my family didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up. My parents were pretty poor, and I grew up in a beat up trailer house. My dad was unemployed a lot of times. So they didn't know how to handle money themselves. So when they did have money, a lot of times they would waste that money. All of a sudden they might have a windfall and have a few $1,000s. Well, they would go out and spend that immediately on something instead of saving it. So I learned that kind of behavior from them. I call this financial blueprints, essentially, when you learn different financial behavior from your parents or from your friends or from whomever. You model what you see. And that's not to excuse the behavior, but just to kind of explain where it comes from. And so when I grew up then, because I had watched my parents mismanage money, I made all sorts of the similar money mistakes because I was doing what they had taught me to do. And they were never careful about like making sure they were getting the best deals or anything. They just spent the money. Mm-hmm. One of the earliest mistakes I can remember making, and it didn't seem like a mistake at the time because, a lot of times mistakes don't seem like mistakes at the time, is I left home. I went to college. The very first day of college, as you're signing up for classes, there's all sorts of these other booths set up in the auditorium, or at least there was at my school. And so these booths offer things like credit cards or car insurance for college kids or bank accounts. And I didn't have a bank account when I went off to college, so I needed to set one up. And there were two different booths for banks in the gym, or it was a gym, I think. And one of them was a big national bank, and they were giving away a free frisbee if you set up your checking account. And the other one was just a local credit union, and they weren't giving you anything. And well, as a college kid, which one are you going to pick? You're going to go for that free frisbee, right? That's what I did anyway.
For sure.
Well, the credit union account gave free checking. The big national bank that I went with, it was $5 a month checking. And that information was out there. It was available, but I just didn't care. All I cared about was the free frisbee. Yeah, $5 a month. Who cares about that, right? So I signed up with the big national bank, had that account for, I don't know what it was, 15 years, 18 years. Eventually, the monthly fee was increased to $8 a month. I'm sure it's 10 or 12 now if I'd stayed with them. But by the time I left that bank, I calculated I had paid over $1,500 in monthly fees just for the privilege of having a checking account. And I did that. I wanted the frisbee. So that's what it was. It was this free frisbee was not free at all. It was a $1,500 frisbee.
Wow. And the first thing I thought of was you were already at a net loss in the first month, let alone the 1,500. But
yeah. So, I mean, that's very indicative of the kind of stuff I used to do. And I think a lot of people do. It's easy to miss the big picture because you're focusing on a small thing like a free frisbee. You don't think, oh, what is this going to add up to over time?
Yeah, there were two credit cards I signed up for in college. One was the credit card that just simply had the picture of my college on it. There was nothing extra with it. It was just that seemed like the card you're supposed to get. I did end up getting that one. The one that they didn't even approve or send me a card for was I actually signed up for one just because I got a free Oilers t-shirt for filling out the application. But I never heard from them again. So they probably saw how well I was doing with that college credit card and just figured I didn't need the second one.
Well, this reminds me, though, I'm sitting here thinking, do I have any, I don't want to call them zombie accounts because I used that checking account, so it wasn't necessarily a zombie account. But do I have any accounts right now where I'm paying money that I shouldn't be? And I realize that I do. I have one credit card that I signed up for in, I think, 2011 it was, because it offered like 100,000 bonus miles for signing up. It was a huge, huge amount. And I signed up for that. It has a $75 annual fee. I don't actually use that account, and I'm still paying that $75 annual fee.
Mm-hmm.
I used to use it, but I don't anymore. So I need to close that.
Yeah, for sure. That's it's a good point about the fees, because I've had that before too, where with the credit card, but with other things as well. Sometimes you're paying for things you don't use. Before I cut the cord on cable, I was paying for cable, and I don't think we turned it on in 2 or 3 months before I really caught on to, wait a minute, why am I paying for this? so we canceled it right away at that point. But then
how do you watch your hockey games without cable?
Yeah, I try to go to the games as often as I can. It's harder now that being an Edmonton Oilers fan, now that I moved down to just outside of Calgary, I see a lot less games, but I'm pretty busy anyway.
Yeah, there you go.
So what's your next big mistake?
Well, let's think. I have certain go-to mistakes that I talk about when I talk about, because some of the things I've done, I feel like are just so dumb. I guess another example I would use is my father was sick for a long time. He had cancer for a long time. And he had never taken out life insurance when he was younger because, number one, he couldn't afford it. And number two, he didn't plan for anything. So just before he died in 1995 of this cancer. A couple of years before that, he took out a very, very small policy because nobody was going to issue a policy on him when he knew he had cancer. But somebody gave a small policy, and that meant that I got $5,000 in life insurance money when he died. Now, at that time, I already had over $20,000 in credit card debt. if you get a $5,000 windfall, tax-free windfall, I think. I don't actually remember how the insurance works, but I think it might have been tax-free. I don't want to. I feel like I could be wrong on that. So,
and it might be different in the States, anyways, compared to Canada.
Anyway, if you get a $5,000 windfall and you have $20,000 in credit card debt, the only thing you should really be considering doing, maybe set aside an emergency fund with some of that, and then pay off the credit card debt. But almost all that money should be going to pay off credit card debt. Well, that's not what I did. I think, pay off $500 in credit card debt and $500 off of $20,000. But I went out and I spent that money on a brand new computer, and not all of that money. I mean, because obviously it was $4,000, $4,500 that I had left over after setting a little bit aside to pay off debt. But instead of paying down my debt, I went out and I bought toys. I did stuff with it. And within a few months, I had charged that $500 back anyway. So it's essentially like I didn't do anything. I just wasted that windfall, that $500 in life insurance money. And so that's another stupid thing I've done. Another example of my stupidity.
The 500 off on your credit card, that must have been almost nearly the interest anyways. So,
yeah. I was doing math just what was I doing? I think I was doing Quicken. I still use an outdated version of Quicken, like Quicken 2005 or something like that. That's just when I track my money in. And it's got stats going back for a long, long time. And I was just looking at the numbers the other day, and I realized I paid out a small fortune. I mean, figure the interest rates on these credit cards are like $20 or 20%, right? Mm-hmm. And if I'm carrying a $20,000 balance, then I'm spending $4,000 a year on interest alone. That is insane. That's almost $400 a month. Yeah. And I mean, that's out of all the mistakes I've made in my life, that's probably actually the biggest mistake is carrying the credit card debt for so long. I had 17 years of credit card debt at $4,000 a year. Oh man, do the math.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned you had this credit card debt for 17 years, and I believe the checking account was a similar amount of time. So is this sort of like is this the same period in time? Is this like the worst for JD Roth? Okay.
Yeah. Well, and again, I didn't have good financial habits. I didn't learn them. And then my habits just got even worse as I got older. And I had to hit rock bottom. For those who don't know my story, I ended up with over $35,000 in consumer debt. That was my peak consumer debt in around 2004. And my then wife and I bought a new house. It was a 100-year-old farmhouse outside of Portland, Oregon. And we bought this house, and on paper, I could afford it. And one thing to understand is my wife and I kept completely separate finances, and she was excellent with money. I was the one who was bad. So on paper, I could afford this house. But as soon as we moved in and started remodeling and having to furnish it and all this stuff, I just felt like I was drowning in debt. So in October of 2004, I sat down and I drafted a plan to get out of debt, to get out of this $35,000 in consumer debt. And I figured I could do it in 39 months. And sure enough, that's what happened. I got out. I started following the plan. I started writing about my process and my progress at getrichslowly.org. And I got that paid off in December of 2007, I think it was.
Great. So let's switch gears here a bit. I know there's a couple times in the past where you've had issues with investing as well. Can you tell us some of your investing mistakes?
Yeah. So for the longest time, I was one of I wanted to try to get rich quickly. I was always looking for shortcuts, and I didn't understand how investing actually works. I thought investing was like gambling. I really did. I thought, it's like, you pick the right stock and you make $1 million, and that's investing. So I would do things like when Palm, makers of the Palm Pilot, their stock had an IPO probably in 2001. I don't remember the exact year. But I took all the money that I had at the time, and I don't remember how much it was. It was probably $1,000 or $2,000. It wasn't a lot. And I put it all into the Palm IPO on that very first day. I think I bought it for like $100 a share, and ended up, the stock just plummeted, and
Wow.
I ended up losing a lot of money. But I repeated that pattern for several years until I learned rational investing techniques. So I think it was Countrywide Insurance was another stock that I bought down here in the U.S. And also, I know for a fact that I bought the Sharper Image. I think it was in 2007, 2008. So this is even after I've started writing about personal finance, and I know better. I still am making these mistakes. But I had a friend who worked for the Sharper Image, and he's like, yeah, the company's really been in trouble, but the owner's trying to turn it around, and I think we might do it. And he wasn't trying to sell me on the stock or anything like that. He was just talking about what's going on in his day-to-day business life. And I'm like, oh, they're going to try. Well, I like the Sharper Image. I'm going to go put my entire Roth IRA, which is one of our retirement vehicles here. I'm going to put it all $4,000 for whatever the year was. I'm going to put it into the Sharper Image. Well, the Sharper Image went bankrupt, and I lost all $4,000.
Wow. Yeah. That's, I know of both companies, but yeah, that's two rough picks. I had a Palm Pilot back in the day, and if I was even investing back then, I probably would have thought the same, that this is something that was going to revolutionize things, because of course there wasn't an iPhone and everything back then.
You know, a lot of those mistakes that I'm making, when I think about them, it's just me being overconfident and being young and thinking that I'm smarter than everybody else, and that bad things can't happen to me, I guess. And part of getting older and wiser is you're like, nah, I'm not any smarter than anybody else. I'm just going to go and do what all the experts say are the smart things to do. You know, invest in index funds, or pay off the debt slowly. Don't try to look for quick ways to get rich. And so the older I've gotten, the more, well, I want to say the wiser I've gotten. I don't think I'm smart. I don't think I'm smarter than anybody else. I'm just like, all right, I'll just do what I should.
Mm-hmm. And it's hard to be. I totally get the mindset, because I was there too at one point, where you think you can pick the right stocks, but really there's people doing this full time that are hopefully smarter than us when it comes to that. And so yeah, how do you beat all these people?
Yeah, and you can't. I mean, you just, that's why I've decided that. Well, you've read the same books I have, I'm sure, that just going for average with index funds actually ends up being an above average approach to investing. And so I've given up on, I still own those shares of Sharper Image. Actually, they may have zeroed them out now. For a long time, it carried in my Fidelity account, and it said it's worth like 18 cents for the entire lot. But I think they zeroed it out and made it go away or something.
Yeah. So how about further on here now? You've built up some money, but I know you've been doing other investing as well. Do you want to speak on that? Sort of your foray into angel investing?
Yeah, I don't know whether I can't say that my angel investing is a mistake, but it has all the earmarks of being a mistake eventually. So angel investing is basically you're putting money into startup companies, right? So sometimes these are brick and mortar companies. A lot of times we associate angel investing with tech startups. And so what I've done over the past 3 or 4 years, or not 3 or 4 years, but over the past year, before I put the brake on it, is I invested in 3 or 4 different companies. I think it's 4 companies. And I put a lot of money into each one. I'm almost scared to say how much I put into each one. And I have high hopes, as do the owners, that these companies are going to do well, right? But at the same time, I'm beginning to realize, now that I started down this path, that mentally I am not cut out for this. Because when you take a large chunk of money and you put it into one company, it's just like picking the stocks, like what I was doing earlier, right? Yeah. It's almost the exact same thing, but with even more money. And so now I'm really tense about this whole thing because, again, have high hopes that these companies end up making me some money, make back 2 or 3 times what I put into them. But realistically speaking, I've had to just like close off. I've had to write it off as if this money is gone. And so I feel like this could be a mistake in progress.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see where we are in 5 years.
I hope for the best, but I agree that you're kind of seeing the same signs as when you bought the stocks. Like you're not nicely diversified and everything. You're kind of going all in on a few companies.
Have you done angel investing yourself?
Nope. I barely get into anything other than ETFs. I have friends that they'll talk about their technology stock purchases, and I won't even touch technology as a stock because I've just seen so many things come and go. Like, who knew 15 years ago that things like Apple and Google were going to be running the world? So,
well, yeah, 15 years ago, Apple was on the ropes, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, and now they're the most valuable company in the world. Where will they be in 15 years? They could be back on the ropes. It's when you're just picking one company, or even if you're picking 10 companies, that's not a very big pool. You're putting all your eggs in one basket, basically.
Yeah, and sometimes it's those tech ones that look the most enticing because people see this huge opportunity, but they're also the ones that are going to fall quicker too, because something else will always come. Yeah. So for one more thing, if we could, we talked a lot about your mistakes. What's the one mistake that you see the most people making? Something that you see and you kind of shake your head and want to sort of help redirect them. Is there one particular thing that you think happens way too often?
That's a great question, Tom. For me, I've been reading and writing about personal finance for 12 years now, over 12 years. And in that time, I think the biggest mistake I see people make is they're not serious about their money. That's the wrong way to phrase it. People don't realize how much control they have over their own financial destiny. They think they're at the mercy of their employer or the economy or or the government. I mean, any number of other things. They don't realize that they have a lot of control. They are steering the ship. I guess let's use a metaphor. It's like you're on a river, right? And the current is flowing in a certain direction. And absolutely, the current affects where you can go, and the rocks in the river affect where you can go and all that. But you're still able to steer the boat. You're able to push it in the direction that you want to go. So you've got to account for all these other things, but you're the one who is steering toward whatever destination you want. And I feel like a lot of people I know don't take charge of steering the ship. They just put themselves out in the current and let things go. And what this means from a practical perspective is they don't take charge of their savings. They don't take charge of finding the best deals. They do things just because they think that's what's expected of them. So like they might buy a new car or buy a big house because that's what people at their age or in their particular demographic, that's what they do. And so what I think people should do instead is spend some time thinking about what is it they want out of life? What's important to them? And this sounds kind of touchy-feely and new agey, I know. And I don't mean it in that kind of way. I mean, I want people to sit down and say, okay, I'm 28 or 36 or however old you are now. Where do I want to be in 10 years? And where do I want to be in 20 or 30 years? What is it I want to do? What is it that I want out of my life? And once you figure that out, make a plan for how to get there. So as an example, say you want to travel the world. And that's kind of a trite example, but say you want to travel the world and that's really what you want to do. But right now you're stuck in a low paying job and you're in debt. Well, how do you get from where you are to this ideal lifestyle? Or maybe you want to have a nice house. I think of my brother, Jeff. He just has a nice, pleasant existence in the country. He lives in a small town here in Oregon. And he wants to raise his kids in this safe environment and put them through college. That's great. How does he get from where he was, let's say 10 years ago, to where he'll be in 10 years from now? I mean, I want people to sit down and plot out deliberate courses and make decisions that help them reach their goals, financial and otherwise. And to me, the biggest mistake people make is not being deliberate about this and just going along with life and letting life push them in whatever direction it pushes them.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great way to put it. The idea that you can kind of just take control instead of like when you mentioned the investments, you didn't blame the companies for falling in the hole. It was your choice to invest in them.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, it's important. I don't want to belittle the role that chance plays or misfortune, because using the metaphor of steering down the river, sometimes there are hidden snags under the river that you don't see, and you run into them and you spring a leak. Well, that's not necessarily your fault, but it is your responsibility. You still got to patch the boat and get back out there. Yeah,
do that course correct kind of thing, and
yeah.
You still know where you're trying to head. Exactly. So thanks for being on. Can you let everyone know where they can find you online?
Yeah, you bet. I started GetRichSlowly.org in 2006, sold it, but now I bought it back. So I'm writing at GetRichSlowly.org, and I try to write about just practical, everyday personal finance for regular people. I'm not writing like for idealized versions. We are emotional people. We make mistakes. So I write a lot about my financial mistakes, how to recover from them and recover from the mistakes, and then how to avoid them in the future.
Great. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks to JD for sharing all the issues he's had on his personal finance journey. I'm sure each of you will be able to find at least one piece from this that will help you out at some point. You can find show notes for this episode at MapleMoney.com/JDRoth. Are you a new listener? Head over to MapleMoney.com/show and find all the ways to subscribe, or just search for Maple Money in your podcast app. I'm looking forward to having you back here next week.